Hello and welcome to the Plant-Based Runners podcast. I'm Ellie Busby, your host and plant-based nutritionist and founder of Vojo Health. Today I'm speaking with Justin Burt, who is the sales manager at Nature's Corpse International, who produce Ahiflower Oil. Now, Ahiflower is a kind of a brand new form of plant-based omega-3, which is very exciting. And Justin and I talk about the balance of omegas in this oil, how it is different to flax and chia seeds and other forms of omega-3, why that is important for runners, the sustainability in their work they are doing with UK farmers to grow this new crop, and much more. I very much recommend it. So, Justin, you work at Ahiflower and you guys produce or partly produce omega-3 supplements, or omega-3 that's used in some supplements. Omega-3 is a very important topic for a lot of people, especially in the plant-based and athletic community. And many people don't actually get enough omega-3. And then when you look into it, it's kind of confusing. Like, some sources say you should be supplementing with fish oil, DHA specifically. Some sources say that you can get all your omega-3 from plants. So what is your take on all of this?
Well, you're definitely right that most consumers do have an imbalance in the fats that are in their diet. It's extremely hard to avoid high levels of intakes of things like soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, all of these that are at high levels introduced to our diet and creating kind of pro-inflammatory states and not really allowing our systems to regulate themselves appropriately. So this is why we take omega supplements. And our company, kind of going back a number of years, really highlighted that there'd be a really good opportunity to identify a plant-based source of omegas that is truly bioavailable in our systems and effective in the way that all of this published science around fish oil has been very effective for humans. But we need a sustainable source. And from my take, I really find that if you can introduce omegas to your diet, whether it's from flaxseed or chia or ahi flower, or even if it's from fish oil, it's more about finding a balance in your diet of the fats that you're intaking. So, like I said, it's very hard to ignore and avoid some of these commodity oils because they're in so many products. But if you're taking some sort of supplement, I think that's the objective. And getting a little bit too in depth about, is it DHA, is it ALA, is it EPA? That can be a little bit overwhelming. A lot of people don't really quite understand that. So our fundamental with Ahiflower is that we've really created a source that is shown to be bioavailable in your system, and it's delivering all of the omega-3s and all of the omega-6s that are needed for optimal wellness. And with that, it's really just about finding that right balance. So introducing that into your diet and hopefully experiencing the benefits. It helps your body regulate appropriately, things like inflammation, post-workout recovery. So especially for sports and nutrition in that sense, there can be really great associated benefits with how our bodies are addressing inflammation and especially post-workout recovery. So with Ahiflower, that's what's exciting to us. It's plant-based in the way that flax is, but the omega profile is a lot more robust, both on the omega-3 and the omega-6 side. So really, I think if consumers are getting omegas into their diet, that's the main focus. But if you want to get a little bit more in depth about the sources and the benefits of different types, then that's certainly great. But it's really for us about finding that balance.
Yeah, you're right. The balance is so important. And for everybody, it's different as well. And that can depend a bit on genetics and other factors. So Ahiflower also contains omega-6, which is interesting because a lot of the supplements on the market are omega-3s. Like, that's pushed as the most important because actually we can get a lot of the omega-6s we need from our diet. It's quite hard to get not too much, actually. It's easier to get too much than not enough because it's available in a lot of plant oils. And we for sure have enough refined plant oils in our diet nowadays. So as Ahiflower also contains omega-6, how do you recommend that people make sure they're not getting too much omega-6?
Right. So that's the interesting thing about Ahiflower. And like I mentioned, this is where things I think can get a little bit confusing for the consumer because not every omega-3 is created equally. And in the same sense, not every omega-6 is created equally. And the omega-6s that are present in Ahiflower are mostly composed of a little bit of linoleic acid, which is common in most commodity vegetable oils, but at relatively low levels and at a significantly lower balance. So in Ahiflower, it's actually primarily delivering omega-3s and delivering less omega-6s. So it's helping you balance that, take down your omega-3s and bump up, sorry, take down your omega-6s and bump up your omega-3s. Um, but interestingly, in Ahiflower, there's an omega-6 called GLA, and it actually is associated with anti-inflammation, hormonal regulation, skin health, and it's found in sources like evening primrose and borage oil, which sometimes you can find in the marketplace around the omega supplements aisle. But it's actually a natural component in Ahiflower, so it's delivering one of the healthy omega sixes instead of one of the pro-inflammatory omega sixes. So in Ahiflower, it's something that's also helping you achieve that balance because you don't want to be flooding so many pro-inflammatory omega-6s into your diet, and finding that balance with the omega-3s is important. But there are also essential omega-6s that can really help with your health outcomes like GLA.
Yeah, for sure. And it's important to note that omega 6s are also essential. You do
That's
need
right.
some of them in your diet, they're not all bad. What is How is GLA different to the type of omega 6 you'd be getting from vegetable oil, for example?
Right. So the type of omega-6 that we're getting from vegetable oil it is converted at low levels into GLA actually. Similar on the omega-3 side, we see ALA that, is purported to be not so efficient at converting into longer chain omega-3s. On the omega-6 side, that's really similar. So the omega-6s we're getting from commodity fats are not really being processed effectively by our system. So that's why we get this buildup of pro-inflammatory omega-6s. The benefit of GLA is that it's actually skipping that step and it's delivering the direct beneficial omega-6. So instead of having low levels of this being converted and getting a surplus of bad omega-6s, we're delivering it directly. And like I mentioned, there's all of these great associated benefits with GLA that whenever you're putting it directly into the body, it's helping with that balance of omega-6s as well as omega-3s.
Interesting. So on the omega 3 side of our hair flour, um, it's mostly ALA, correct?
Compositionally, yes, the biggest omega-3 component in ahi flour is ALA, but the thing that sets it apart is that it's the highest available source of SDA omega-3. So similar to what I was just mentioning about how omega-6s are converting into GLA, um, omega-3s also convert through to longer chains. When we consume ALA, our bodies are processing that. Although in some cases it's determined that that might be not as efficiently. So we really focused on finding the greatest source of SDA because similarly, you have ALA that's not being converted super effectively. But if you're delivering SDA, which is the next building block in omega 3s, we're actually seeing that it's boosting all of these longer chain omegas that come further down in the chain. So with Ahiflower on the omega 3 side, it's really fantastic that it's boosting your ALA contents as well as kind of the full spectrum of omega 3s, all the way through to DHA, it seems now. Um, I noticed you had a really great podcast with Richard Bazinet earlier in your series, and he's been working with Ahiflower and really uncovering some of the exciting science. But what he's really been finding is that Ahiflower is one of the best sources for boosting your total omega 3s instead of just ALA or instead of just DHA. So it's really great to have a source that's kind of full spectrum in that sense.
Yeah, that is so important because there is a lot of focus in the supplement industry on DHA. And then, when there started being more studies realizing that EPA also has an effect, a different effect, or it impacts different areas of inflammation and your brain, then, there was more of a focus on that. And now we're seeing that there are actually lots of these along the conversion, there are lots of different omega 3s that are important because they act in different ways. So it's really cool that you guys are at the forefront of this topic.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's something that we've really been kind of honing in on the fact that it's not all about DHA. All of the omegas that are introduced in the system prior to DHA are also essential, and they're also important for their own functions. So it's interesting because with plant-based sources, they're mostly only delivering ALA. And like I mentioned with Ahiflower, how it's boosting this full spectrum of omega-3s in our systems, we had actually done a head-to-head trial comparing Ahiflower to flaxseed oil and found that Ahiflower was up to 4 times more bioavailable. So it's actually really showing the efficacy about how our bodies are processing the omega-3s in Ahiflower much more effectively than other plant-based sources. So we feel like we've really bridged this gap between plant-based sources that are only delivering ALA and marine sources that are only really delivering the longer chain EPA and DHA. We have something that's doing all of the benefits from both ends.
Mm-hmm. So wait, Ahiflower is the omega-3s from Ahiflower are better, 4 times better absorbed than what, sorry?
Than the omega-3s in flaxseed oil.
Okay.
Right.
Is that partly because with the flax seeds, you actually need to digest them, and digesting it is like, a lot of work?
So in this trial in particular that kind of gave us that stat, it was a head-to-head comparison of flax oil and
Okay.
Ahiflower oil. So not directly consuming the flaxseed, which are great too. I mean, there's a lot of health benefits associated with consuming the seed itself as well. And I know that ground flaxseed is used in a lot of products too. But in this trial, we were really focused on the omega-3 content. So flax actually contains around 20% more ALA omega-3. But since Ahiflower has this SDA component, it actually creates a much more effective boost to your total omega-3 contents.
That is so cool. And I really love that you guys are doing the research as well to back up all of these claims. It's like, yeah, it's really cool to see.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because Ahiflower is a trademark name for an ingredient that we went out and found, and you know, as I mentioned, we recognize that there's growing demand for omegas. We're uncovering all the signs about how essential and how important they are to our diets. And going back about 20 years when our company started to search for plant-based omega sources, it was really seen as an opportunity for us in the sense that if we're going to give everybody on this planet the omega nutrition that they need, we're simply not going to have any fish left in the ocean because the primary sources were coming from marine omegas. And so we really scoured the earth to find, what are the best plant-based sources of omegas. Flax is obviously very popular, but we were looking for specific, omega-3 and omega-6 components in a plant. And we came upon this weed species that had never been commercialized before and spent spent a good number of years working with United Kingdom farmers to develop this crop into something that could be grown in an agricultural environment. So it was it was a very lengthy process because there was no GMO development or anything like that around the crop development. Everything was done naturally. And we worked really closely with farmers in the United Kingdom to help us achieve this, since they're the experts in their trade, and we kind of brought this seed to them and said, listen, this doesn't really want to grow in a field environment. What do we need to do? And now today we have Ahiflower, and it's growing really prolifically in a field environment. We're growing it regeneratively with farmers, so now we actually have a crop that's providing wellness to the earth and the soil that it's being grown on, and we're producing that into an oil that's also bringing wellness to humans, and it's really exciting.
That's amazing. And so we hear a lot that algae oil is the more sustainable option compared to fish oil. How does iFlower, what's the sustainability like? I mean, it sounds from what you've just said like it's very sustainable, but compared to something like algae oil.
Right. So, and I'm not as much of an expert in the production of algae oil. I know that I think that it requires a lot of energy to produce, but it is also, I think, sustainable in the sense that algae oil is plant based. So sustainable in the sense that we're not pulling fish out of the oceans. It is a vegan friendly source. So in that sense, it's I think an improvement over pulling fish oils out of the oceans. With Ahiflower, the sustainability messaging was really that, it was fundamental for us to identify a source that could truly be grown sustainably. And so for us, in finding an oilseed crop that could deliver this was really fantastic, because we can always plant more acres of Ahiflower. And, we really feel that it's a source that can deliver the omega nutrition to the world. It's a crop that can be grown in Europe. It's currently all grown in the United Kingdom, but it can be grown in other areas in Europe, in Canada, in the United States, as well as areas in the Southern Hemisphere. So as an agricultural seed crop, that's something that can be done very scalably. We can always plant more acres. And then beyond that, since we're growing it regeneratively, we're even going sort of a step beyond sustainability. We're looking at, how can we put more back into the soil than what we're taking out of it? Which is kind of a big consideration about, where are you getting the oils in your diet and what are the impacts that they're having on the planet and your wellness? Like we were talking about a lot of these commodity omega-6s, a lot of them are grown on, commercial farming operations. It's not super traceable, and they're probably not really having a great impact on the environment or the soil that they're being grown in. But with Ahiflower, we're doing this regenerative agriculture with the crop. The farmers who grow it are very passionate about that because it's something that's really integrated across sort of a whole farm model, and how they approach farming from a fundamental level. So we're testing things like soil, microbial biodiversity, insects and birds that are on the farm. There's effective crop rotation to make sure that we're not reaping all of a certain nutrient out of the soil. So sustainability in that sense, I think, is really exciting for Ahiflower because it's one of the first movers into this sort of regenerative agriculture movement, and it's a very big fundamental to our part of delivering wellness from omegas, both for the planet and for the people.
Wow, I didn't even know any of this. This is really cool to hear.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
what sort of farmers do you work with? Do they grow specific crops, other crops?
They definitely grow other crops. Ahiflower fits really nicely into, I think, a lot of their grain rotations. And I'm certainly not the agronomist by trade, but we do have a team in the United Kingdom who works with our farmers, and they kind of manage that whole process. But we have a long list of growers in the United Kingdom who are interested in growing Ahiflower, and we're just kind of waiting to bring them on board as our demands grow. And like I said, it fits really seamlessly into their agricultural model. It fits the rotation nicely, and with more farmers in the UK getting behind regenerative agriculture, it's something that fits really well into what they're doing. So Ahiflower is sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. I have another farming question. Sorry for
Sure.
dumping
I'll
loads
do
of
my
farming
best.
questions on you. This is quite interesting for me, though.
Yeah.
So how does the sustainability or the farming practice compare to something like flax seeds and chia seeds? Because obviously these are the main sources of plant-based omega-3s in a plant-based person's diet. So it would be cool, if Ahiflower is much more sustainably grown than chia seeds, and I don't have to eat chia seeds anymore, then that'd be great.
Yeah, and I don't know quite as much about, I think this is maybe part of the issue is, where are your chia seeds or where are your flax seeds coming from? And that's a big question. And fortunately, something about Ahiflower is that we can tell you where Ahiflower has come from. So anytime you purchase a soft gel or a liquid oil product or something that has Ahiflower in it, we can point to the field that it was grown in, and we could tell you the farmer's name. And that's something that's really exciting. So the trouble with something like flax or chia is that, they're still a little bit specialty, but almost kind of reaching on a commodity level where you maybe don't have that insight into traceability about where did that come from, what type of farm was that grown on. And, I'm sure that they're great crops for the environment, but it's really a question of how they're being grown. And if you can't really point to where that's coming from, you can't really know how it's being grown or the impact that it's having on the environment. But like I said, with Ahiflower, that's one of the exciting value propositions about the ingredient.
I for sure don't think my chia seeds are grown in the UK, but actually I have no idea where they're grown. I'm going to check right after this. Okay, cool. So what improvements in sport performance and just general well-being do you think runners could see if they start supplementing with Ahiflower?
Right. So this is kind of tapping into a little bit about the impacts that a balance of fats has on our diet. So if we're in a state where we have too many omega-6s in our diet, we're not balancing that out with an omega-3. Basically, the way that I sort of visualize it is that the processes in our body are not able to work most effectively. So if you're going for a run and you're finishing up, you wake up the next morning and you're very stiff and sore. And your body takes time to kind of release that tension and provide anti-inflammatory support so that your muscles can relax and recover. That process becomes a lot harder if you have an imbalance of fats in your diet. So whenever you're so um, heavy in omega-6s, you're stuck in this pro-inflammatory state. So it's probably taking your body a little bit longer to fully recover and kind of get back to homeostasis. Whenever you're balancing with omega-3s and specifically with Ahiflower, we're seeing that there's really great impacts on um, the anti-inflammation properties. In one of the studies that was done with Ahiflower, it actually highlighted that Ahiflower does support post-workout recovery, specifically post-workout recovery. So after high-intensity training or things like that. So for me, when I take Ahiflower, it's understanding that I'm giving my body what it needs to recover effectively. And I'm not really someone who often takes a lot of ibuprofen or acetaminophen because I'm achy because I was at the gym or went for a run the other day. But I take really good pride in the fact that I'm giving my body what it needs to recover effectively on its own. So it's really about delivering the healthy omega fats that allow it to run those processes and recover the way that your body was designed to.
Yeah, you can for sure notice if you're not getting the balance right. And specifically if you're more sensitive to the inflammatory effects of omega-6 as well, which, as I think I mentioned earlier, like depends on your genes. I'm a more genetically sensitive person to omega-6s. And years ago, man, I used to have the worst knee pain from running. It
Hmm.
was it was really bad at some point. And I've been vegan for a few years and I couldn't figure it out. And after I had a genetic test, I saw that I had this high sensitivity to omega sixes, and I just stopped using vegetable oil and rapeseed oil because they're quite high in these omega sixes, which
Right.
can be inflammatory, and also started supplementing omega three, and it, I haven't had knee pain since then, and that was years ago. So yeah, for some people, just getting this balance right is just so incredibly important. And if you're
Mm.
living with joint pain or any sort of slow recovery or anything like that from your running, then yeah, just try and rebalance your omegas and see what happens.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of the exciting thing is that, we have uncovered a lot of science that really explains a lot of this in detail. But, I think that you can break this down to a very fundamental level. You don't even need to overthink it. And it's the fact that, omegas are essential to our diet. Every cell in your body has omega-3s and omega-6s, and we need to consume them. The question is, where are you getting the fats in your diet and what are the impacts that they're having? So with adding Ahiflower into that regime, it's really helping kind of boost the positive effects of the fats in your diet, and it's helping with that type of recovery. And I think that a lot of people, it could be a subtle change. It might not even be something that they fully recognize, especially depending on their genetics, like you mentioned. But um, it is something to be conscious of and to consider, what are the fats in my diet? Where are they coming from? What are the impacts that they're having on the planet? But also within my system and my ability to recover, especially after something like a long run or a long sprint or something like that.
Yeah, you're totally right. It may not be like muscular that you see these symptoms, but for example, mood can be a big factor. Like because you need a lot of omega three for your brain. Your brain is basically running on omegas,
Right.
um, and some people get a huge boost when they start. Uh, like when they increase their intake of omega 3 and they reduce their intake of omega 6. So that's another area, and genetically some people are more sensitive to that than others, and some people need more omega-3 for their brain than others. So yeah, that's another area. And of course cognitive decline, another area that omega-3s are
Uh,
very important for. So not only your muscles but your brain.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I try to take a bit of approach. There's a number of different ways that you can make investments in life, but it's certainly worth it to make investments in your health. And, I can only imagine the impacts of, I see a lot of older people in my life, and, after years of being exposed to this sort of fat imbalance, I'm sure that that's having a lot of the, impacts on the, the chronic situation that a lot of people are dealing with. And if you're making investments in, balancing the fats in your diet, I think that has really great long-term impacts on, longevity and movement. I want to be someone who's running into my 50s and my 60s if I can help it, basically as long as I can. So, you got to do things on the front end to make sure that you're capable of that and that you have that longevity.
Yeah, totally. But, sometimes it's hard to make those decisions 30 years before they're
That's
actually going
exactly
to have
it.
that positive impact. And yeah, like that's why I think genetic testing is so important, because if you see, for example, that you have the Alzheimer's gene, which significantly increases your risk of getting Alzheimer's later in life, then you need to be increasing your omega-3 intake dramatically now as soon as possible, because if you start when you start getting dementia in your 60s or 70s or whatever, it's too late. Like it's not going to have an impact
That's right.
anymore.
Exactly.
So Ahiflower produce the ingredient, but you guys don't actually produce the supplements yourselves, right? So what brands do you recommend in the UK that people can check out with Ahiflower inside?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I mean, we've developed Ahiflower, and we're bringing it to market as an ingredient. So, we're really excited about the supplement brands and even the functional fortified food brands that are working with Ahiflower to bring the ingredient to consumers. But, ultimately a big goal for us will be for, when people start to consider Ahiflower the same way that they view flax. So we're not necessarily the ones providing the supplement, but we work really closely with the brands who do. So directly in the United Kingdom, there's a couple of brands that are selling Ahiflower oil in vegan soft gels. It can be found at the Protein Works. It's listed on their website, as well as a brand called Peak Sups. Further to that, there's also brands that through e-commerce, UK consumers would be able to source from. And there's one called Zinzino. They're based in Norway, but they actually distribute all across Europe. And they have a formula that uses Ahiflower in their vegan balance oil. And it's also fortified with a few other ingredients as well as algae DHA. So if anybody is really looking to get some of that into their diet, it's a great product that's kind of full spectrum with multiple different ingredients. And then another really cool one is a brand called Jimmy Joy, and they're basically a plant-based nutrition, meal replacement company. So they have dry protein beverage shakes, and in their Plenty Active shake, they actually have a powdered version of Ahiflower. So it's helping deliver some of the balanced fats through that, which is, a really great fit because they're trying to really deliver complete nutrition in a dry beverage form. And in order to have that complete nutrition, it's great to get the healthy fat piece of that from Ahiflower. So those are a few of the exciting brands. We're continuing to grow, and we hope that there's going to be a lot more available, in the coming months and years.
Cool, thank you. And okay, last question. Apart from Ahiflower, because this would be the obvious answer that I'm not going to allow you to have, what's one thing that you would recommend runners to do today, like a change they can make to their diet or lifestyle that will help improve their running and their health?
I would say that I this isn't probably going to sound super special to a lot of runners, but I would really stress and emphasize the importance of just stretching continually, because I through my childhood and through my teen years, I was always a pretty avid runner, but I would run, I just wouldn't stretch, and I was fine with that. My body seemed fine with that, but kind of what I was touching on about this longevity and having the ability of movement into the later years in life. I think that maintaining your own mobility and stretching effectively is something that really helps you achieve that. So I go to the gym frequently, but I probably spend maybe a third of my time kind of on the mats, just stretching out after a workout. Same thing after a run, and I think that it really helps me feel so much better, especially heading into the next day. So, not a super special tip, but But if there's a lot of runners out there that were anything like me, 5 or 6 years ago, that would just kind of pump out a 5 or 10 kilometer run and go about your evening without stretching, I would recommend it. It's definitely made me feel much better.
Agreed. It's incredibly important for the process of muscle adaptation. So I also back up your recommendation.
Yeah, we spend so much time, I work at a desk. We spend so much time where, I think that there's available periods where we can be stretching, we're standing around, we're waiting, and, it's not often to find me, standing in a line in a bit of a lunge, you know, working myself out. So, find ways, find time for it. It makes a big difference.
My thing to do when I'm standing in line is leg raises for
Right.
like calf strengthening. So I feel like that's not quite as obvious as doing a full lunge.
I know.
So I can get away with it. But
Yeah, I'm a little more shameless in that sense.
Justin, it was really, really nice speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ellie. Really nice to speak with you too.
Oh, one more question. Where can we find out more about Ahiflower and where can people follow the incredible work you guys are doing?
Right. So we have a website, www.ahiflower.com. And we also have an Instagram page, which is really great. We're often highlighting new brands and new product launches there. So it's a great spot to kind of stay in touch with everything. But just for kind of a good, rounded information on what is Ahiflower and, some of those details, definitely check out the website. It's a great resource.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Justin Burt about Ahiflower. I for sure am going to start supplementing more Ahiflower as my main source of omega-3. If you're interested in getting a genetic test to have a look at some of the genes we talked about, including how fast you convert omega-3s, your sensitivity to omega-6s, and whether you have the Alzheimer's gene, then head over to vojo.health, where you can check out our DNA tests and what we do and